Hi, my name is Trainmaster04, and in this video I'll be reviewing the most long-awaited locomotive of the year, and that is the Chesapeake & Ohio F-19. So without further ado, let's get started.
Albuquerque engine 3001. Starter up, stand by to pull. Over. Copy that, Albuquerque. We'll start her up. 3001 out.
To start this video off, let's first begin with a history lesson over the real C&O F-19s and also, more specifically, engine number 494. C&O 494 is classified as an F-19 Pacific locomotive with a 4/6-2 wheel arrangement underneath the boiler. She was built by the American Locomotive Company, otherwise known as ALCO, in 1926 and was the last of 5 F-19s produced. 494 and her siblings were designed to increase the C&O's motive power on passenger trains that traveled through the railroad's mountainous lines through the Blue Ridge and Allegheny ranges. The F-19s were initially posted to operate fast passenger trains east of Charlottesville, Virginia. The class proved to be successful. In 1930, the locomotives were assigned to pull the C&O's The Sportsman, and in 1932, the George Washington, which ran between Washington, D.C., Cincinnati, Ohio, and Louisville, Kentucky. 494 and her siblings continued to serve the C&O through the Great Depression diligently, but by the 1940s, the F-19s began to see some change. By the 1940s, the C&O required yet even more powerful steam locomotives and soon took delivery of their famous 484 Greenbrier locomotives. This forced the F-19s, along with 494, to be put onto secondary passenger trains as the Greenbriers took charge of the most famous passenger trains that the F-19s once pulled. Like most railroads in the United States, World War II was a harsh time for 494 and her siblings, as their routine maintenance was delayed in order to keep wartime freight moving across the C&O. The war ended with victory, but the locomotives found themselves worn out, defeated, and eligible for scrap. However, Robert R. Young, president of the C&O, saw potential in the F-19s. Robert R. Young decided the C&O needed to advance in steam motive power by designing a new high-class passenger train. The train in question was called the Chessie and was primarily pulled by an experimental steam turbine classified as the M1. To haul the Chessie feeder trains, President Young needed more motive power, but did not want to invest in any new locomotives. His attention was directed to the aging F-19 fleet, a tried-and-true passenger class of locomotives that still have great potential. Like phoenixes rising from the ashes, 494 and her siblings were transported to Huntington, West Virginia in 1946 to undergo a transformation from a 462 Pacific into a 464 Hudson. The F-19s were given a larger firebox, an additional trailing wheel underneath the firebox, roller bearings, and a Franklin Type A poppet valve gear. All except 494 also received streamlining and were given a yellow paint scheme. The locomotives were reclassified as L1 type Hudsons and were given the name Yellow Bellies. The Chessie passenger train, however, would never come to be, and 494 and her sisters were delegated to second-class passenger trains once again. The F-19s, now L1s, began to be retired in 1953 and was finished in 1955. Out of the 5 locomotives built, only one survives to this very day. Engine number 490, the first locomotive of this fabled class, currently resides at the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum in Baltimore, Maryland, from which these locomotives were born from the fire, all but one returned to it. With the history on C&O 494 taken care of, let's go ahead and move over to the stats and facts on this model. This model was recently released in Lionel's 2023 Volume 2 catalog, but was not delivered until December of 2024. The great delay is reportedly due to a decal error on the models, resulting in Lionel shipping all received F-19s back to be repainted. Now, there is currently no physical evidence that this is true. However, there have been some great word of mouth in comparison to previous other models that Lionel have had errors from their factory going around on the OGR forum. For measurements, the locomotive and tender have a combined length of 26 inches and has a minimum curve radius of 0.54. Under the hood, this locomotive is equipped with a single large flywheeled motor and is also equipped with two fan-driven smoke units. The first one being located underneath the smoke box for the main smokestack, and the second one being located in the middle of the locomotive right near the steam dome for the smoking whistle. For electronics, this model is equipped with Lionel's Legacy rail sounds and also control system, allowing the locomotive to be equipped with 5 different whistles, 5 different bells, and also have the option to change the front classification lights from green to white or simply turn them off. Finally, this model can be operated via Lionel's Cab 3, Cab 2, or Cab 1 command systems, and it can also be operated via Lionel's Bluetooth app or conventionally by simply putting power to a loop of track. To access all of these features this model has to offer, it is suggested to use Lionel's Cab 3 and Cab 2 command systems. With the model stats taken care of, let's go ahead, take a closer look, and go over all the separately applied and molded in details. Starting at the front of the locomotive, here at the pilot area, as you can see, it is already detailed haven with a bunch of stuff going on in this one little area. For starters, there are 2 separately applied steps leading up onto the pilot deck. There is a separately applied coupler cut bar going along the pilot and is connected to a separately applied chain that runs straight through a scaled dummy coupler. Now this model and all of the other F-19 variations do come with a dummy O-gauge coupler, so if you got more than one F-19 in your fleet, or if you want to double head with another locomotive, you can simply swap out this scale coupler and put in the O-gauge dummy coupler and be able to double head. Other details on the pilot are these 2 separately applied brake hoses and service lines for any form of passenger train consist, and a nice little detail that may not be able to pick up on the camera is there's actually a plate going over the pilot itself to allow the ends of the brake hoses and service hoses to not go and swing in between each slat, something that you don't really see that very often. On the pilot deck itself, there are 2 separately applied flagpole stanchions. Unfortunately, they do not have any drilled out holes within them, so you can't really put any flags within them. 2 separately applied ladders going up to the running boards, which we'll get to later on in this video. And then in the center, here is the headlamp, which does come on when the locomotive's in operation, and it's adorned by 2 separately applied number boards, which are nicely highlighted with white paint. Looking up at the smoke box front, and this is really where the F-19 style comes into play. Surrounding a very small smoke box door, which unfortunately there is no room to actually make it operable, there are these 2 highly detailed air compressor pumps, some of the most detailed pumps I've ever seen on a model. They are adorned with separately applied piping going up and around over into the inner depths of the locomotive itself. They are beautifully painted in a matte black as well as the silver to match other appliances on the locomotive. In the center there is a turned brass bell, which actually looks very nice, and I'm so happy Lionel is sticking with turned brass instead of painted plastic. Up top here is the iconic looking Alesco feed water heater with massive piping coming off of it and going along the side of the boiler. And then right up front here is a bit of a grab iron with 2 separately applied marker lights or classification lights, which, as stated earlier, can be changed colors from green, white, or simply be turned off. Moving over to the engineer side of the locomotive, down at the bottom here are the 4 set of pilot wheels, which are nicely highlighted with white walls. The cylinders are also nicely highlighted with cylinder caps, which are nicely polished in a silver, molded in rivet detailing, and a nice matte black finish. The valve gear in this locomotive is Baker valve gear, which is correct to the real F-19s and are nicely polished, as you would expect for any passenger locomotive. Underneath the running boards, there is a separately applied mechanical lubricator hiding in this little area, separately applied pipework, and also an air compressor tank located right in between the pilot and the cylinders. The running board itself is also highlighted, similar to the pilot wheels, with the beautiful white pinstriping running along the length of the boiler. And speaking of the boiler, it too is nicely detailed with a separately applied handrail that goes along the length of the boiler. Separately applied pipework, in this case the one where I'm pointing to is for the feed water heater, and other parts coming off the Alesco feed water heater going back and into the boiler. Smoke box is nicely painted in a very unique and a graphite gray with molded in rivet detailing and two separately applied builder's plates, the upper one being, of course, the American Locomotive Company builder's plate. Continuing on down the engine, here are the 6 driving wheels, which are also nicely painted and highlighted with the white walls, polished side rods, and also darkened center caps. Underneath there is yet even more details to be seen, in this case various piping for the air compressor air cooling system, power reverser leading up to the Baker valve gear, separately applied pipework leading down to part of the feed water system underneath the cab, some more running boards that are nicely highlighted in the white pinstriping, a separately applied ladder, more pipework leading up to the upper portion of the boiler with a exposed turret, and also the end of the handrail. As you can see, the boiler itself is very nicely painted in a matte white. It's not really a scream-in-your-face bright white that you would expect from like steam or something, or even pure cotton, but it is a nice matte-looking creamish white. For details, there are molded-in boiler bands as well as boiler brackets up top, and also a few molded-in water washout plugs, separately applied equipment, and also a molded-in step leading up top to the boiler. For the cab area, the firebox is nicely painted in that same graphite gray as seen earlier with the smoke box. It has a very wide ashtray underneath it and very wide holes, allowing for this locomotive to have quite a nice ash pan glow effect when it's in operation. And then the cab itself is also nicely detailed with the correct 494 right along the side, pinstriping, the locomotive designation for the C&O, molded in rivet detailing, separately applied grab iron over the window, and then speaking of the windows, there are 3 separately applied windows, 1 up front and 2 on the side, and one of them actually can open and close like so. Inside the cab of the locomotive, as you can see, it is nicely illuminated with an LED light and is also modestly detailed with 2 hand-painted crew figures, 1 on each side, a nice glowing firebox coming through the molded-in firebox doors, some hand-painted valves and gauges along the top, and also a separately applied throttle assembly over on the engineer side. On the outside of the cab, there is some molded-in rivet detailing, molded-in grab irons, 2 separately applied handrails going down along the cab itself, molded-in cool auger assembly, and then finally at the bottom, the infrared sensor. On top of the boiler, starting from the right and working down to the left, here in the smoke box is again the Alesco feed water heater. Up top you can see it is nicely detailed with some rivets, pinstriping, massive pipes going down into the smoke box, and 2 surface crane hooks. In the center, here is the main smokestack, which too is nicely painted in that graphite gray. Now, as stated earlier in this video, the locomotive is equipped with 2 fan-driven smoke units, one for the main smokestack and the other for the smoking whistle. In order to fill both smoke units with smoke fluid, you simply just pour it directly down the stack, and the smoke unit for the smoking whistle will get its smoke fluid as it trickles from the main smokestack. And the center here in the white boiler is the single sand dome for this model. As you can see, it is painted in that matte black, a really nice contrast compared to the white boiler. And if I bring out my hand, you can see it also contains all of the necessary operating switches for this model. Inside it contains the run program, on and off switch for both the Bluetooth, main, and whistle smoke effects. Down in the center here, again in the matte black finish, is the steam dome with the associated whistle feature on the opposite side, which has a nice thick metal cord going from the whistle back to the cab. Now, one caveat that you may not be able to see at this angle is Lionel missed, unfortunately, a seam right in the center of the steam dome, causing there to be a bit of a distraction when the locomotive is staying still. But if you look at it from the right angle, you won't see it at all, but still something you would not expect on such a high quality model, or in this case, a little bit of a lazy miss-up. Continuing on back, here in the turret area, it is extremely busy with a bunch of fine piping coming off of the dual turrets, valves, and necessary piping to go from steam-powered accessories. Here in the center are the safety valves for the locomotive, which unfortunately, similar to the whistle, are not the turned brass as compared to the bell, so it does not have that same high-quality sheen as you would expect for a Legacy model. On the cab roof itself, it too is painted in that matte black, is riddled with molded-in rivet detailing, and also 3 separately applied roof hatches, which as you can see are operable like so. Finally, taking a quick look at the fireman's side of the locomotive, and as you can see, it is practically identical as compared to the engineer's side, other than a few extra details or lack thereof. For instance, underneath the running board, there are less exhaust piping for all of the air compressor pumps to allow the air to cool off. And right here, what would look like as an air compressor is actually a part of the feed water system. It is the feed water pump, with a massive pipe coming down from the locomotive's tender underneath the cab and up into the smoke box. On the smoke box itself, there is yet even more piping coming off of either the marker lights or even the feed water heater. On top of the boiler, here is a separately applied dynamo generator with conduits coming off of the generator itself, and then here's a better view of the whistle with the smoking whistle hole located right underneath it. Moving over to the tender, starting at the front, here you can see it too is nicely painted in that matte black finish and is also fairly detailed for a tender front. Down at the bottom, here are 2 molded in steps, fairly hefty in comparison to other models, straddled by 2 separately applied grab irons. In the center, here is the coal area itself with 2 coal doors for the firemen to make sure there's plenty of coal in the tender, 2 molded in doors for toolboxes, 2 separately applied details up top, molded in coal auger underneath the tender deck, and finally at the bottom, here is the tender end for the infrared drawbar. Looking at the engineer side of the tender, and as you can see, this model is equipped with a Vanderbilt tender instead of the normal square-shaped tender. Now, what classifies a Vanderbilt tender than any other ordinary tender is that the water tank itself is extended and is also cylindrical instead of your typical squared shape. Starting underneath at the frame, here you can see are the 2 6-wheeled trucks. In this case, they aren't really highlighted as compared to the locomotive's wheels, but do look nice with molded-in journal boxes and brake rigging. In the center, here is a separately applied braked air tank, and the frame itself is modestly detailed with molded-in rivet detailing and supports. On the tender deck itself, it too is nicely detailed with molded-in rivets, an exposed coal bunker with more molded-in rivets, a separately applied walkway on top of the tender itself, and also a ladder towards the rear going up to said walkway. At the back of the tender, starting at the bottom, here you can see are 2 molded-in steps leading up to the upper portion of the tender deck itself, and right in the middle, the electrocoupler for this model. In this case, this electrocoupler can be thrown by using Lionel's Legacy Cab 3, Cab 2, or Team CC Cab 1 command systems, and can also be thrown by using Lionel's Bluetooth command system. Up top for other details, there is a separately applied grab iron right next to a separately applied coupler cut hook, which in this case operates a lot nicer than the front one in my opinion. Here are those 2 separately applied ladders leading up to the deck, which does have some nice safety tread. Some more grab irons in the middle and wrapping up to the upper water tank deck. In the middle, there is the capacity for the coal and water. Engine number 494 issued again, both in the correct Chesapeake and Ohio yellow. And then finally, here is the reverse light, which does come on when the locomotive is put into reverse. On top of the tender, starting at the right, here is the massive coal bunker for this tender. In this case, the coal load is actual pieces of coal chopped up and glued into place. I would like to have seen the coal load be a little bit bigger, or in this case the individual chunks to be a little bigger, like MTH models, but in this case it still looks really good and fairly good to scale. Continuing down to the water tank itself, which as you can see is primarily 3/4 of the entire tender. It is surrounded by a perimeter of separately applied grab irons so that crews can grab a hold while they are walking along the side running boards, 2 separately applied steps on either side so crews can go from this running board all the way up to the upper deck. Now the deck itself is actual metal, but Lionel has kept the Team CC tooled pieces, in this case it being molded in rivets as well as molded in wood detail. I have a feeling there are a few modelers out there that will end up modding this locomotive, including a realistic wooden deck up top with a bit of a more lighter stained color instead of the flat black. And then in the center there is a water hatch, which is a little difficult to get to thanks to the flush paneling, but once you can get your fingernail up into the separately applied grab iron, you can see that the interior of the water hatch, which used to carry any form of TMCC volume knob control, is now vacant. So theoretically, nowadays you could just simply get some realistic water and pour it right on in, since it's a sealed off area. Now that the locomotive and tender have been covered, let's go ahead, fire up this model, and go over all the sound features.
Train 1 brakeman, let's get an application for continuity test. Good application, okay to release. Train 1 brakeman, we have good set, good release, good continuity on timetable train number 1. Over.
That's a roger. Good set, good release, good continuity on timetable train number 1. Out.
Let us now begin with all 5 whistles and bells that this model has to offer. Here is the steam blowdown sound. Here is the water and coal fill-up sounds.
Water's full. Out. My coal's full. Out.
And finally, here is a sampling of both the crew and tower comm chatter.
Ashpans are empty. Dispatcher, am I cleared to the outbound? Over.
Hold for signal indication. Dispatcher out.
Got a lot of tonnage today. Better bunch in some slack before we start out. My coal's full. Out. Dispatcher, we're ready. Is it okay to pull? Over.
Take the green. Out.
Alrighty, I got a freight train hooked up behind the tender. Now, Do take note that unfortunately I do not have any C&O passenger cars, and what Eastern Road passenger cars I do have are not really enough to give this locomotive a really good, nice, long train to pull, so I opted to cut the middle and put on some heavy-looking, weathered freight cars behind this locomotive. So, without further ado, we've been given the green signal, so let's move her on out.
Roger that. Have a good run. Dispatch, you're out.
dispatcher. Going to sign the register book. Out.
That about wraps up this product review, but before you go, let me go ahead and answer the two questions that I normally ask around at this time of the video, and they are, what is the original MSRP price for one of these models, and also what is my opinion on it? Well, to start off, the original MSRP price from Lionel is right at $1,300. Now, as of the making of this video, since this model is still a fairly recently released model from Lionel, you shouldn't have any problems finding any of these models or any of the other variations of the F-19s out there online. For instance, you can find these models currently through Mr. Muffin's Trains, Legacy Station, Charles Rowe, and even trainworld.com. I'll put affiliate links down below in the description for you all to be able to find either the white boilered version or just simply any of the other F-19 variations, so that if y'all want to purchase one of these, you very well can. Moving over to the second question, which was, what is my personal opinion on this model? And initially, when I first heard the F-19s were going to be released, I was a little skeptical, and even more skeptical as once I heard Lionel shipped all of their F-19 models back to China to get repainted. In my mind, especially after the Dreyfus-Hudson fiasco with the paint, I was expecting another flawed model with either a bad gearbox, loose screws to the body shell, and more importantly, bad quality control, whether that be with the details or, most importantly, the paint. Thankfully though, when I first opened this locomotive out of its shipping box, I was just completely blown away. When I lifted it out, the weight was what hit me the most. This model is a hefty model that really gives you a sense that it is a powerful, everyday, or hard-working locomotive that will just give anybody some form of joy, whether that be pulling a freight train as shown in this video, or even the Sportsman or the George Washington from the old Team CC days. Something else that I was actually quite pleased was the tooling. Lionel didn't really change much of the old Team CC F-19 tooling that very much. Instead, they genuinely improved it by applying modern painting techniques and even updating the electronics and features within. From the Team CC days, the locomotive was great. You had some form of rail sounds at the time, and you could also operate it at scale speeds to a certain extent. But now, with all of the legacy features, smoking whistle, and all of the wonderful paint schemes that Lionel's coming out with these engines, it just is a great model. To those who have some form of Eastern railroads, or just like the Chesapeake and Ohio, or simply just want another Pacific to add to their fleet, this model is a smashing hit. For once, it is nice to see Lionel coming out with a Team CC model, or a model from the past, either that be their own or even from MTH, and they actually make it even better. Hopefully, with the announcement of the 2025 Volume 1 catalog here and gone, it will be a continuation of those Team CC days, but be even better. That's it for this product review, but before you go, I just want to say thank you very much for clicking on this video and also watching it to the very end. As I'm currently going through College of Mechanical Engineering Live, time on my hands is very slim and far between. As a result, these high-quality production videos for you all to enjoy is, well, needless to say, pushed back on the side burner. So when I do put these out and I see how much joy you all get out of watching these videos and also find new ways to get into the hobby, it just brings great joy to me that I'm actually helping the hobby and those who are trying to get in the hobby enjoy it to the best of its ability. If you enjoyed this video even more and you would like to support my channel, go ahead and click that like button, as that lets me know you would like to receive yet even more of this type of content in the future. And if you don't want to miss any of my future videos, whether they be product reviews or even YouTube shorts, also go ahead and click that subscribe button. That will automatically register you to the TM04 family and will also register you to get automatic messages whether I've posted something new video-wise, or even in the community page. But without further ado, my name is Trainmaster04, and I'll be seeing you next time.
Dispatch, this is 3001. We are done for the day. Heading to the register room to sign out.